Three,
Yay!
2, 1.
Good morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason on Mason Works from Mason Works Marketing on Conscious Business Zone with Peter Panagore. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Panagore.
Panagore.
It's an unusual name. We are the only Panagores in the United States. There's about 7 or 8 of us. I'd have to get a current count.
Panagore. I speak Italian. So
We're Greek.
it's Greek.
We're
Oh,
Greek.
have you been to Greece?
No, long story. Stupid youthful choice. That's all I can say.
Well, you still can go once we can get out of here, once we can
Mm.
travel again. You want to go? Oh my God, it's just
Hmm.
fabulous. And the islands are amazing, amazing. So anyway, so everyone, I'm so excited to introduce you to Peter, and I met Peter because I am a volunteer and a member of IONS, which is the International Associations for Near-Death Studies. And I have been very, very excited about the people that I've met through this organization because they've had experiences that were transformative, that allow them to really see the bigger picture of who and what we are. And for Conscious Business Zone, I think for conscious business leaders and people that work with conscious businesses, this is a really important avenue to discuss. So Peter, okay, you are an amazing guy. You have a Master's of Divinity from Yale. I didn't even know they did that.
Oh, that was the first school at Yale.
Wow, I didn't know that. My dad graduated from Yale, but you have written several books because you've had 2 NDEs. So could you talk a little bit about that while I invite some people to our conversation?
I'd love to. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank
Thanks for
you.
having me, Kathy.
Sure. Oh, yeah, this will be fun.
So, I was an undergraduate at Montana State University as an exchange student from my state school in Massachusetts, and I went ice climbing for
Oh,
March break with a partner. We went snow caving first. We skied way into the backcountry and lived in snow caves in Alberta and British Columbia. And we spent one day ice climbing, and on that ice climb, I made a mistake in
oh,
my equipment. I'd been an outdoors person my whole life. I'd been winter camping since I was 11 years old in the Boy Scouts, and I was on the National Ski Patrol. And so I was, and I'd done a lot of mountaineering and backpacking. So but it was my first time ice climbing. And although I'd done a fair amount of rock climbing, I decided that I would brave my way through with one ice axe and an ice hammer on this world famous climb with a trained, certified lead climber, my partner buddy Tim, and climbing partner. And so we made this ascent, but my climb was slower than his and everybody else's who was climbing that day because I couldn't rest. I could only rest one side of my body at a time. When you put an ice axe into the ice, you can
wow.
let go of it and dangle and relax on a strap, but you can't do that with a hammer. The hammer is much too short, and there's no way that you can suspend yourself from it. And so I tired out faster than other people and made the ascent. We plowed our way up to the top of this climb, but we got there when the sun was setting, and the temperature dropped to about 30 degrees in an instant. And all the other teams, I remember sitting on the ledge looking down at all the other teams who had climbed that day, and they were walking out. That's what we should have been doing. We should have been at the bottom walking out. And
Oh,
so the temperature dropped about 30 degrees. The hypothermia set in immediately. We were dressed for the temperatures of the day.
oh,
Nobody was prepared to spend, none of the other climbers, nobody prepares for spending the night on a day climb.
right.
And so we rapidly were in trouble. And we'd been on the ski patrol working in a mountain in Montana that winter, uh, realized immediately the danger that we were in. And I ended up with clattering jaw. My jaw was like a cartoon, clack, 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 clack,
Yeah,
uncontrollable, like muscle spasms.
yeah.
And my whole body was in muscle spasms, trying to keep itself warm. And Tim hauled up the rope and ended up in a 300-foot knot because it got dark and because the sun set, and we had to the stars came out, giving us some illumination. I had to take off my gloves to untangle the rope, which was a very, very, very long knot and hundreds of feet. And so by the time we got it undone, it was an hour, maybe 2 hours. I don't really know. I didn't check my watch. I didn't even have a watch. Tim and I talked about our survivability because that was an immediate concern. It is where we were climbing is a day's drive from the Arctic Circle.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's crazy. And we we decided that we were going to die, and we were going to die fighting. That's what we decided. We were going to snuggle up with each other and canoodle against the mountain to conserve our warmth, but we didn't have any warmth. We were both already in hypothermic beginnings.
Oh
And
my.
so with the sun down, we roped off to each other, and in the starlight, because it was starlit, which is, unless you've been in the deep, deep wilderness, you can't conceive what that's like. It's eerily beautiful. And so, but you can see enough, and I can see very well in the dark. And so we made our first traverse, and we got to the first rappel, and we made another error. We were supposed to use a piece of webbing to wrap around the tree and put the rope through the webbing and throw the rope down. But because if you wrap the rope around the tree, it could freeze to the tree and then get stuck. But we knew that. But at this point, our cognitive abilities began to fail because our brains were freezing. And so we made another mistake, and we decided that we wanted to not spend the money on the webbing, lose the webbing, because you're going to leave the webbing behind. So we descended, and when we get to the bottom of the next rappel, there was a 40, like an angle. So we had to we weren't rappelling against the rock on the last bit of it. And
Wow.
the rope, the snow was knee deep anyway, and we were now advanced enough in our hypothermia where our coordination was lost, and we were having a hard time speaking because our jaws were frozen, and we were thinking less well, and we couldn't get the rope down. It was frozen to the tree. And so with both of our weights pulling on the rope on one side, because it was a double line, we couldn't get it loose. And so Tim tied these special knots. They're a pair of hitches called a Persig hitch, in which you tie them on the rope. They're tiny, thin line. You create these big loops so that you can ascend back up the rope again. They're ascending hitches. And I tightened the rope around my waist, made it taut enough for him to ascend up 150 feet, which was his intent. But he got up maybe 20 or 30, and the rope came loose, and he fell down into the snow. I rolled out of the way. It's deep snow. Nobody got hurt, but it was still like, I'm falling, and I'm like, oh my God. And I'm telling this story really fast to cut to the chase. So, which is what happened when we died, and when I died. And so I guess I could continue telling this exciting story, or cut to the end where I die and leave it up to the time. It's a timing issue. What do you think? Want me to keep
Oh,
going, Kathy?
we have time, but it's more about what I mean. The opportunity for people to understand is that anyone could have this kind of experience, but you are actually you were somewhat awake. I mean, a lot of people have a car accident and then they wake up in the hospital out of their body.
Well, except for it, I should tell you the rest of the story
Okay,
then.
okay, please do.
So I'll try to make it quickly through this part. We were alone in the middle of the wilderness on the Ice Fields Parkway, which is extremely rurally populated, sparsely populated, no cars all night. Finally, one car comes by, they drive right by, they never look up because we're on a freaking mountain and nobody's looking up there.
Right.
So then suddenly a truck comes down the road and pulls into the parking lot and flashes his lights at us. And we deduce that it's the warden at whose house we spent the night before.
Who's looking
Uh,
for you?
and he came looking for us because we signed into the wilderness log. And he flashed his lights. We jumped up and down. He flashed them again, indicated that he could see us. We're heartened by this. We begin our next traverse. And as our hyperthermia advances, and now I've got frostbite on all of my digits. Everything's sticking out of me. I still have them, but they're all troubled. I have damage in everything, and so everything that was exposed. And so I we made this traverse. We get to the next rappel. We rappel down. We're off the ice. We rappel down this crag in the shadow, so it's in the dark. But the moon had risen, so there's a 3/4 moon, so we could see better. We round the corner. We're on rock on a ledge with 2 iron pins and rings with straps permanently attached, and we hook in. Tim's on my left. I'm on the right. We're in into our carabiners, into our harnesses. We're in serious trouble. My feet are like frozen blocks of ice you get at the convenience store.
I'm all tense
Oh,
here.
oh, it was okay. Imagine, and we had decided not to talk because every time we spoke, we both felt our energy drained. So we were young bucks with no fat at all, and so we had no reserves. Our bodies were already beginning to consume themselves, ketosis. Like so, we were like that, and so um, we hook in. He flashes his lights in the truck and drives away because we got one rappel to go. It's the middle of it. It's like 2 in the morning. Okay. And so off he goes. And we thought, oh, we're good. We'll get down to the car. We'll get the tent. And the rope got stuck. I pulled on it the first time and it jammed in. Like I didn't even get 6 inches on this thing. I maybe got 2 inches and boom, it's locked in around the corner. I only have one end of it because I tossed the other one out and I had tied it to my harness. And now we're in serious trouble.
Yeah.
And Tim couldn't help me. He couldn't get to the rope. And if I untied the rope, we could have dropped the rope, which meant death.
Right.
And so my job was to try to get the rope free. And so this is where I start to lose consciousness. And so my body gets really hot, which is what happens in hypothermia. The body wants to preserve its core, doesn't need its hands. And so I open up my coat, which I know because I'm on the ski patrol, I'm pulling people off the mountain with hypothermia all winter long, and when frostbite and all this stuff. But I don't really care. And so I unzip my coat. My temperature drops further, faster. I remember thinking about my parents and my family, and I could see the beautiful mountain off to the side and the snow and the ice on it. And I started thinking about God, and I started falling asleep. And so fall asleep is the last stage of hypothermia. I would fall asleep, collapse on the ledge, smack, wake up, pull myself back up, pull on the rope, repeat. And then I pulled myself back up. And as I stood up, I got this like a fade to black. There's an optical thing that happens to the eye in hypothermia. Uh,
Okay.
they call it tunnel vision, but there's like this technical thing that happens where the eyes like go like this inside your head. And
Okay.
so my peripheral vision comes closing in on me like a fade to black. And I'm like, what is this? I've never seen this before. I'm thinking, totally black. And I think to myself, I'm not asleep. Why am I still conscious? How come I can't see anything? Am I standing? How can I be standing? I should be. And I didn't understand what was going on. I'm now in this confused state when my vision opens up in front of me and the blackness that had closed down became an opening of darkness, which was oddly illuminated. It was like, and way far, far in the distance, a bazillion trillion miles away, was this little pinprick of light that came rushing toward me and filled my entire visual horizon at faster than I could possibly imagine because I could see how far it was away. And it communicated to me telepathically, like I thought to myself, intelligence. This is intelligence. And it communicated to me, I'm taking you. And I thought, no, you're not. And I took my willpower. I've been driving myself all night long on willpower.
Right. Right.
That's what we were doing. And so I took all my willpower and shoved it up like a wall, and like it was nothing. It just took me like the wall wasn't even there, and I'm out. And I'm being carried now. I'm like enveloped, and I can see myself being carried. And I'm being carried, and I'm enwrapped, and I'm in comfort. I'm in contentment. I'm not wondering what's going on anymore. And I get rushed up this wide expanse becomes this narrow tunnel at the same time. And I get rushed way up, way, way, way up to the end of this infinite space. And I'm popped out into nothingness. And now my angel is, I don't know how to describe it. It was less than the divine, but it was also part of the divine.
Okay.
And so now I'm in this illuminated darkness that's infinite, and I can see in every direction around me as if I had 10,000 eyes, or one, or I was a single eyeball with one big pupil. And I thought to myself, this is me. This is who I am. How did I not know? How did I not remember that this is myself? And I was in contentment in this infinity. There was like, I was, except for I was also, the contentment just wasn't in me. And so then I saw this portal open, and it's a gate, a portal, a door, gigantic, humongous, but there's no time
Right.
and there's no space, and I have no molecules. I have no brain, I can think. I have no eyes, and I can see. I am consciousness. All of my senses and more are integrated into one singularity, and
Okay.
I am and have always been that thing. And I reached up to this portal with myself, my soul, and I touched it, and it was, this portal was like this shimmering, translucent, and transparent barrier and opening at the same time. And there was this really long tunnel, like I was looking at infinity, and this tunnel was really in, like, part of infinity.
Right.
And so when I touched it, it infilled me with this rush of all livingness. Like the door itself was capital A, all living, L. All life, all living flowed into me and infilled me, and all these things happened at once. And I tell this in a sequence. It's nowhere. It's not sequential. There's no time. All time and no time. And I am no thing, and all things is filling into me. And I I tell it like this because this seems to be the first thing that happened. I went through my own hell of my own making. I went through all the suffering that I gave everyone in my entire life as like I had given them a bad gift. And I suffered their pain that I gave them from their point of view times 10,000, because it turns out that the pain that I gave away, I thought was little, was much larger.
Oh, wow.
And it was all of the intentional pain, the things I wanted to do to my sisters, for instance, and the unintentional pain that I, like, cause a friend accidentally or whatever. But every single one of them, from like beginning, and I wrote this sequence runs through, and meanwhile inside me, it turns out that I gave all the pain to me, and that I also experienced their experience of the pain, and all of my reasons or actions and justifications or accidents that caused their pain. And I judged myself as shameful and guilty. And I judged myself that way, not because of the burden of my sin, but because I had also brought with me all of the love that had ever been given to me, and all of the love that I'd ever given away was also mine. And it
Mhm.
seemed like it enabled me to turn my soul eye to see the immensity of the love that was surrounding me. This infinity was love itself, and it was speaking to me in non linguistically, telepathically. No, when I say telepathically, I don't mean like I'm hearing words, because
Right.
there's no words. But it's saying to me, I love you, I made you, I know you, I've always known you, and I see myself in my creation. I see myself as a speck, like a photon that's separated, like all the photons in all the universe, all without becoming a black hole, all pushed together, and they become this one massive. And I could see this little tiny bit of that massiveness, and I knew that I was a separate quality, or a smaller quantity of the same quality,
Beautiful.
of like a, and I was both it and not it, like superposition, like I was in. And I could see the long tail of my soul, like this elongated eons of my truer self, from the moment of my being called into being. And I could see that because my name was spoken. I was
Wow.
called my name, but it wasn't Peter. It has no language. It has no, because there's no tongue. And so this long tail of myself has bifurcations in it, like micron thin. And I can see now that they were lives, but I can't see what they were, and I don't know where they were, but they were this big compared to the immensity of myself.
Right.
They were almost inconsequential, it was certainly inconsequential to the calling of the origin of my being.
Right.
And so then I I was forgiven and I was infilled with love. I was forgiven. I love you. I made you. I've always known you. Nothing about you has ever been hidden from me. I forgive you. And meanwhile, I could see also all of humanity's sinfulness, and so all of my own sinfulness, the hurt that I cause other people, is equal to everybody else's, because that's the nature of the universe, not just Earth. The nature of this whole universe is brokenness in comparison with perfection. How
Right.
can perfection, who knows perfection, not love the imperfect that has been made by it? So I was beloved. And I also, my equality as a human being is oriented not toward, well, it's where my origin of the whole not judgment thing comes from. I know I'm exactly the same as everybody else.
Right.
And so then I was infilled with this is like this list of bliss, paradise, beauty,
Yeah.
awe, adoration,
Yeah.
love, compassion, understanding, knowledge, like you, anything you want, I wanted to know, I knew. And the list goes on of all these different qualities that we separate on earth, but for me they were a unity. They're not a fragmentation. And so, charity is love, compassion is love, kindness is love, generosity is love, forgiveness is love. All these things are all love. And and then I said, and then I was infilled with this oneness that was like, it inflated my humongous self to the edge of its bursting like a balloon. And I felt like one more drop of this bliss I would obliterate. And it was, well, it's like, it was so beautiful that it was almost painfully beautiful.
I understand.
Just so. And I said without language, am I dead? And the voice said, yes, you're dead. Voice, no sound, no gender, no religion,
Yeah.
just love. And I say, well, I can't die now. And the voice says, come home. It's time for you to come home. Come home. Why can't you die now? And I say, my mom and my dad. My sister had vanished when I was a kid, and my mom had a terrible breakdown, and my dad had terrible trouble as a result, and the family was broken. It's why I was in Montana in the first place. I was running away from Boston, and
Wow.
I was immediately taken and shown all of Earth. Like I was carried to the very edge of the creation of this universe, where I could peer down from above with God kind of by my side, showing me 7 billion people all at once. Like every one of them individuals and individuated, and all of them covered with the veil, and they're all going about their daily lives. And I can see my parents' faces in particular. And the voice says, with this huge, eternal, timeless, infinite love, says, in the way that I love you now, I have always loved you, and
Oh.
always will love you, and with this immensity of love that is completely incomprehensible here. It's
Mhm.
like I can't even tell you. It vibrates in me, and I love every single human being that same way, and in the way that you are healed and whole and out of suffering, so will it be for every single one, and for your parents. And so there,
Oh.
and because you know timelessness, because the length of my life was the snap of my fingers,
Yeah.
and because you know timelessness, you know that it will be over soon. But I could see their future suffering through life, and I could measure it against the infinite of the love, which made it nothing. But I also could see their faces, which made it something.
Right.
And so I asked, I hadn't gone through that door yet. Do I have to? So, as I think about it, the door came into me.
That's interesting.
I never had that till this moment, but I I hadn't gone to where I was directed. I hadn't gone all the way, and the I said, "Do I have to go?" And God says, "No, yes, I want you to go, but no, you don't have to go." I said, "Well, can I come back here to this oneness of being, this union, this state of union?" And God says, "Yes, you can come back." I say, "I choose to live my life." And God says, "You won't live your life," and sends me back. And on the way, there's like this like a suspension bridge cable that thick, but times a billion,
Uh-huh.
and all these little tiny ends of the cable, they're cut off so you can see all the ends, and they're all entry points back into my life. There's
Oh,
10 million of them, and they all wind together, and they all intersect on these, like every choice. I can see the choices that I can make in any one of them, and I see what they are, and I see in the center of this cable is like this divine pure light, and I think to myself, I could go that way, but I don't. I like my bohemian lifestyle, so I kind of shift off to the side a little bit, and I enter at this point, and I'm not. I get like that much time to think about this, like
right, right.
whoosh, and the next thing I know, I'm feeling myself from my immense size being crushed down like a balloon and a nitrous. What is that liquid that's super frozen? Liquid nitrogen. It's like a balloon in liquid nitrogen. I go and it hurts, and I get screwed into my chest, and I feel like, oh, I don't even fit in this thing. What is? It's like way too small, and it hurts so much, and I don't even know what it is or where I am or who I am or anything. I just know that this is not me, and I eventually come to, being shaken by my buddy as I figure out hand and thought and breath and heartbeat and feel these things in pain. My whole thing pains. And I had just been in no pain, and now it's really painful. And Tim helps me up, and he's screaming and yelling at me, "You were dead. You were dead. If you died, I was going to die." And he calms down, and I have no idea where I am. I'm
Are you
like,
still on the mountain?
I'm still on the mountain. Now I'm back in my body again, and we're still on the mountain 150 feet up. And Tim's like, and I'm completely disoriented. I felt like I was like, that. I don't know if your fans have seen the movie Avatar,
Uh-huh.
where, yeah, I was like, only I didn't know where I was going. It was like everything was super alien. Like I was the alien. And eventually language kind of came back on board, and motion, and he got me to pull the rope, and the rope came free on the first pole. We descended, and the Icefields Parkway is like 70 yards away, and the parking lot's across the street. So we go over to the car, and we talked this through. You can't get in the car and heat it up because we're hypothermic. We got to raise our temperature very slowly over hours so that we don't end up dead. And so we get the tent out, and we get in sleeping bags. We treat ourselves, and that's kind of, and I'd never been the same person since I came back. That's born. I was a charismatic Catholic born again Christian at the backsliding. Okay, I was also a hippie. Okay,
Yeah.
but which I don't consider backsliding anymore, by the way. um, um, and maybe the church still probably does. But I became an entirely different person. I was really
Wow.
born again.
So you were about 20 years old?
I was 21, just turned 21.
Wow.
And then I kept it a secret for 20 years. And went to divinity school, thought about being a monk, went to Yale to study mysticism, which is not what they teach there. But I knew that there were classes there, and I knew that, I got in, and the dean of admission agreed to be my 3-year independent study professor.
Wow.
So I did a 3-year independent study, in classical Western mysticism, with the point of trying to hang language and concepts to see if I could find language and concepts to, think about what had happened to me, because I was alone. No internet, no, didn't know anything about it. And so I also had been meditating before this all happened. The monastery near my Catholic high school, was the place where centering prayer began.
Oh,
And they developed centering prayer through, in part through their own tradition, but also studying with Sasaki Roshi, the Zen master, and Maharishi Mahayogi they studied with, and they brought these into their practice, which ended
wow.
up in my high school. And so I've been meditating with that, and I found that being an alien in this world, that the only way out is in.
Right.
And in terms of the business world, to change the world, it's really within. It's the world itself is, well, it's impermanent and illusory,
Right.
and the only permanentness is inside the world is the heaven that makes it exist.
Right. Perfect. Okay, so I want to recognize that a bunch of people are here and they loved your story Susan's here, Xana's here, Debbie's here, Kathy's here, Larry's here, Lucia's here. And they just loved it. And Zach's here. Zach hasn't been here in a while. Hi, Zach. So you guys, do you have any questions about NDEs or any other concepts? Because we have, Peter has, he actually had 2 of these. And we only have time for, I don't know that we'll have time to hear both, but he will be one of the speakers at the IONS conference online in August. And so that's why I'm lucky enough to have him here talking with me, is that we can get a preview of some of the wonderful discussions. So you studied mysticism. Did you find that the mystics, the ancient mystics, were able to explain? I've had a spiritually transformative experience. I've had more than one, but one big one. And so I was shaking my head a lot during it, although mine was very different, of course. But and I don't know that you have to have physical damage like a lot of the NDEers anymore to have these experiences, thank goodness. But do you find that you could find, I mean, Rumi and did you find eloquence for
I
the?
found an extremely long and detailed history going back before the birth of Christ. And in multiple countries, multiple religions, the Patanjali Sutras, Lao Tzu, uh, and in the Western culture, which is what I studied mostly, there's a long line of them. In particular, there was a big flowering in the 13th century in particular. But these people, you don't need a near-death experience to experience union of God. But there is a caveat to that. And the caveat is, it happens basically 2 ways. Either God just does it to you,
Right.
or you spend your life carving away a space inside yourself in order to thin the veil from this side. So in the Christian language, I stand at the door and knock, open the door and let me in. You got to act. There has to be action. Jesus says, go inside your temple and pray. He says, make your eyes single and your body will be filled with light. He says, seek heaven above all things, and all things will be added to you. Heaven first. And so these are the bases of Western Christian mysticism, which is pervasive in Orthodoxy, Coptic tradition, Catholic tradition, and all the subgroups of that. Not so much in the Protestants. After the Reformation, they kind of abandoned mysticism. But okay, so that all said, not only did I find that my peer group, I found the tools to enhance my own pursuit,
Wonderful.
which is what I was really seeking. And so I find that all the knowledge in the world about mysticism is irrelevant to the practice of it. Because that gives you access to the noetic knowledge. It doesn't, you can't like grab the noetic knowledge, but you can thin the veil on this side enough that it can be brought into you. And once your soul experiences the remembrance of who you are in a partial way, it leaves a mark inside yourself that permanently changes your perspective. And I'd like to say, not only have I had another near-death experience, I'm currently working on my 3rd book, and that is about mysticism, because I am like those people that I studied. In addition to my near-death experience, I've had the unitive experience subsequently, having been kickstarted by it, but because I pursued a life of interior practice. And I would like to say to everybody here, not only do you not need a near-death experience to experience God, you probably already do, or have. I like to use the example of someone who's in love. Maybe it's you love your mother and your mother dies, and the next day, I'll tell you a story. So
Okay.
I'm a young minister. I got ordained, and I hid out in the church for 20 years. That's another story, okay? So mystic hiding out in the church, working for God. So I'm the young minister in this coastal town of Lobstermen where I live still,
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
and I go to this non-church member's house. I'm there like 2 weeks, and this lobsterman dies. He lives on the cove. He's got his boat on the mooring out back, and I go in the house, and Ma and the boys are in the kitchen, and the wives, and Ma tells me the story of his death and how she gets to this point, and she says, and then I came downstairs this morning, and the son reaches out and grabs her hand and says, "Ma, don't tell him." I'm like, "Don't tell me what?" He says, "You can't trust him, Ma." I said, "Can't trust me? Why?" She says, "Well, what I have to say is kind of kooky." And I said, "Oh, I think you don't know half from kooky." Um, So I say, well, I'll tell you what. You tell me your story. I promise you, I won't ever tell anybody your story if I think it's kooky.
Okay.
And so she says, I came downstairs in the morning and I opened the door, and there he was standing at the kitchen sink, looking out the window at his boat, washing the dishes. And he turns around, and I'm shocked this morning. This happened the day that I'm talking to him. She says, I'm shocked. I'm standing there frozen. And he's standing there, and I can see him. And he turns around, and he looks at me, and he smiles. And I get this blast of love. I get this infilling of wellness and beauty and contentment and this love. And I'm overwhelmed by it. And I start to cry, but I'm crying because I know he's still alive. And I close my eyes and open him, and he's still there. And I close my eyes and open him, and he's gone.
Oh,
And so that experience shifted her from belief in the afterlife to knowing it's a mystical experience of divine connection, to knowing that her husband, beloved, is still well. And so it meets the four criteria of William James, varieties of religious experience. He might have been the smartest man that ever lived in America in the 20th century, and you might never have heard of him. And he was a professor at Harvard, the other school. He he was he was mystical experiences are transient. They have a beginning and an end. They're passive. They happen to you. You don't make them happen. They're noetic. It leaves knowledge in your soul, which is more like a remembrance than it is a new understanding, but it's always partial, and it's always just beyond reach of your brain. And so when you try to say it, it's ineffable. You can't ever communicate. That's why the son was like, don't tell him, Ma, he's never going to get it. Because you can't communicate the direct experience because it's non-linguistic. It's not even conceptual. Words are sounds and constructs we hang on top of concepts. And so it's not even conceptual.
right.
So you can't put words to it. And so it never communicates well. So everybody keeps it a secret. It's like a public-private secret. So
Well,
many people have had this.
but I find I can't put words to things. I mean,
That's
I
the
had an
problem.
experience. Yeah, well, it's not really a problem unless unless you have a need to share it, because there's a lot of it that it's more about it's like when you've had an experience like what you've had with your first near death, where you had that experience, you've chosen to share your story so other people can benefit from it. But if you had,
I
well,
didn't choose to tell my story.
you didn't,
Mm-mm. I
it's
finally allowed it.
oh,
Now, one of the very first after effects I had when I came back, we totaled the car the next night. Crazy, okay? That's after being arrested and being in jail. So I'm now on the side of the road the next morning. So the morning we die, the morning I come back to life. Now it's the next morning, and now I'm standing on the side of the road somewhere south of Calgary with my sign, my hitchhiking sign, because we had enough money to get Tim back with the skis. So I'm hitchhiking back to Montana. And so I felt like I had this super pressure inside of me. Like I kept hearing my name being called, non-language, and this pressure inside of me pushing and pushing and pushing, speak, speak, speak. And I'm like, I don't even understand what's going on. I don't even know where I am. I'm completely lost. I have to speak what? This thing that's ineffable? I can't speak that. And I'm like, No way. I'm not doing that. And so, because I don't even understand it. And so I embark on this really long journey of my whole life until the book came out in 2015, um,
Wow.
uh, seeking language for the ineffable. All language about God is metaphor.
Right,
So there is no concrete language about God. And
right.
I could talk all about that if you wanted me to, but somebody asked a question over here. I saw.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to do. What is your view about duality, good and evil, light and dark?
And I want to answer Kathy. Kathy,
Uh,
you heard my story somewhere before because I've told it a bazillion times. And, and so, what was the question? The question I interrupted you about light
was
and dark.
duality, about duality, good and evil.
Oh, this is so. Darkness is not evil. It's an emanation of the light that creates the structure of the universe. It's dark here because it wouldn't exist. Purity in and of itself needs nothing else. For us to even exist, and when I say us, I mean from the Big Bang to the expanding edge of the universe and all of the galaxies and all of the planets and all the star systems and all of the dust and all of the dark matter and all of the quarks and every single thing of all matterness in the universe is not evil.
Right,
It's darkness because for it to exist, it has to be separated from perfection. And anything that gets separated from perfection becomes imperfect. Unless you're like an amoeba and you make another clone of yourself that is an exact copy. That's not the way the universe works. The universe is a limited sort of thing. And so
I've never heard anyone say that either. That's interesting.
well
Very
I
interesting.
was taken to the in another experience, I was taken to the edge of the universe and shown. And so that's a whole nother story too. And so the
Well,
I,
we do this multiple times, I think.
I
So in my attempt to explain good and bad, dark and light, I usually make the analogy that it's contrasts, and that
sure it is
contrast
that.
is the only way that you can actually use the data or um, identify your learning path, or it's not really good or bad. It's contrast. It doesn't have to have. I know Zach was on here before, but Zach would really go after this subject too. That the idea of the non-dual, that it just is, and that we put some sort of definition to it. I still think is really the way it is. Although I can't say I'm not triggered.
Well, you're a human being living in a human body, so there's no getting around that.
Right.
And everything spiritual that happens to us gets filtered through the brain.
Right.
And we live in the world. We're like in the experiment. We're part of the experiment in the experiment. And so we can't escape that, our animal nature, our DNA. But um, eh, I find that the duality of existence, the good and the evil, I mean, suffering is a natural state of the world, of the universe. And human beings for over 300,000 years have been cruel to each other and tribal. And this is the nature of our survival evolutionarily. Tribes survived by banding together with language and passing culture down as units against the enemies of the world. We're still kind of tribal in our way. So
Right.
we perpetrate a lot of the evil, most of it, in the world. You know, earthquakes, tidal waves, that kind of stuff, not us.
That's our consciousness, global
Right.
consciousness.
Right. So
Code.
I uh, I I I point to this because I point to this because it's really not our fault. We're in the experiment. It's not our fault. And if there's a I begin to think that the Satan is the ego. As a result of the necessity of the duality for our existence, the ego needs to work in the world, and it's the one thing that stands in our way. It's not evil.
So
It just
Zach wants to come in now. Yay,
sure.
Zach. Okay, so he said yep before, but now he says nope. Not through the brain. He thinks it comes through the heart. We can escape our animal nature. That's kind of the purpose, folks. See the higher self, and then source animates form. The body comes and goes. We don't. That's my line. Do what you please and hopefully enjoy.
Sure. I agree with you, Zach. You'd be surprised to know that I agree with you, so it's not nope. Uh, it is the entire package of the human being. Our brain is the functional, practical, sensory perceptor of our experience here in which we live. I agree with you that we're emanations through our heart. All of this is metaphor when we talk spiritual.
Right.
So I also, maybe you didn't catch the earlier part of the show. I know I'm an eternal being. I you know I that's more real to me than this place. I live in the fake place. I live in the stupid place. I live in the limited place where my capacities are crushed and broken. And so I wait to escape. And I'm under a prohibition to escape. I was told you didn't make you, you can't take you. And so I
Mm.
so yeah,
Okay,
source,
so
higher self, all that stuff, Zach. Yeah.
I got a couple of questions now. Okay, so first of all, I want everyone to see that we've got Peter's website up, and I'll have it in the description when we're done. So I definitely want you to go to his site and go look at his books. It's quite remarkable work. Okay, so the questions I have are about um, the way that people can. Okay, I've got two questions. I'll start with the first one. You said nope, and you were allowed to come back. My father had 4 serious heart attacks, was in the hospital for 8 months on equipment, and he said nope. But he only had another year or so that he got a reprieve. Do you feel like you have exit points? I've heard a lot of NDEers talk about that, where you may have 2, and if you don't take the first one, if like you opted out on the first one.
I
um,
opted out on the second one too.
oh, okay. How old were you on the second one?
That was just as my book was coming out in 2015, just as it was coming out.
Oh my
I
God.
Yep, I was in the hospital recovering from surgery as the book came out, and when it was launched, I family has a long history of cardiac arrest, widowmaker, clogging up, and I was a vegetarian for 20 years. I ran 5K the day before. I was at yoga when it happened, and I clogged up, and I died on the way. I live in a rural place. I live in the coast of Maine in a resort town, an hour and a half from the cath lab.
Oh gosh.
And so I died on the way in the ambulance, and went up the tunnel a piece with the same, my beloved angel, who I knew and who called to me with all this love, come home, we want you to come home. And I was like, I'm going. I've been waiting for 30 years to go. I've been praying to go every day. So I'm going. And I leave. And I go partway up the tunnel and I think, well, this is taking some time this time. I'll have a chance to think about this because I'm not befuddled. And so I turn my eye back inside myself for a minute, and I see my son at the urgent care in our town, leaning in on me and squeezing my hand and looking me in the eye, saying, "I love you, Dad." He's 26,
Oh,
was at the time, and turns out later I learned that the doc had told him to better say goodbye to your dad now,
wow.
because this is your chance.
Wow.
And I remember looking at my wife, who knows about me, and I'm like, I'm out of here. Love you, but
Yeah, yeah.
you're gonna be fine. So I look back, I see my son, I see my daughter, I see my newborn granddaughter. I know that her marriage had just broken up over abuse and other things,
Oh,
and she needed protection, and so did he. And I thought to myself, I mean, her, the two, my granddaughter and my daughter. And so I turned back to the angel and said, I'm not going. And I turned around and went back in.
and they were okay with that?
They let me go.
So, but tomorrow we don't know what's going to happen.
Who
You're
knows?
on time here, but
Oh, all time is borrowed. Time is completely limited.
right.
And eternity is so much better.
So 30 years you had, 30 years, you had, 30 years 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 you had, 30 the knowledge of having the life review, and you had the chance to be the best person you could possibly be because you knew about,
Try to be.
okay. Did that really affect you though?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, yeah.
So I didn't even tell my parents. I didn't tell anybody for the longest time, for decades. And so a couple of years ago, I was visiting my parents on the Cape Cod. And so I'm visiting my parents, and I say to now they know. It took them, after I came out, it still took them a while to like figure it out. But now they know. And I said, so Dad, that summer, what did you and Mom think?
Yeah, you had to have been transformed
I,
tremendously.
and I didn't want to lead them with leading questions. Did you think I was transformed? So I didn't say that. What'd you think? And he said, your mom and I, we talked a lot, and you were compassionate and kind in a way you had never been before. You were always a good kid, but he said, it was just you were a different guy. And so my entire life has been
Beautiful.
with the recognition that I may go back through my own hell. And I'm willing to do that. Catherine of Genoa in the 15th century,
Uh-huh.
she had a non-near-death experience of union with the divine, and in it she went through what she calls the purgative fire of divine love,
Oh, wow.
the cleansing fire of divine love. And that's a good summary for me. That's kind of what happened to me. And it wasn't that I was bad, okay? I was just human.
Right,
I
right,
was just human, and I just couldn't bring that stuff with me. That's all.
right. Well, and the Maharishi work is TM. So you had been exposed to Eastern Enlightenment in high school, which hardly anybody was. So, I mean, the Beatles were, but that's amazing. That's amazing.
And then I bumped into Paramahansa Yogananda.
Oh, you
Two
did?
thing two things happened. I got back to my university in Massachusetts, and I spent the spring in a national touring company, part of the Montana State University. So I was in theater as well. And so I get back to Montana, to UMass Boston. Where did I go to school? UMass Amherst, and I took a mime class with this guy.
Uh-huh.
And meanwhile, and I'll tell you about that in a sec, but meanwhile, I bumped into Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi. There's
Yeah.
a chapter in there on prayer. And so I go which has a huge influence on me. It still has a huge influence on me.
Wow.
And so in my mime class, my mime teacher is in Marcel Marceau's school.
Wow.
So
Cool.
Hatha yoga, which is a physical yoga, is
Right.
part of Marceau's practice with his students.
I didn't know that.
So we began our classes with Hatha yoga, and then one day the teacher says, "So we're going to do a little thing today. I want you to get this particular asana, and I want you to put your right hand underneath your belly button, and your left hand over your head, and I want you to envision in your hand energy, and I want you to run it up to your palm." And boom, I could do this. And so at the end of this little lesson, he says, "So who could do this? Who felt what?" Nobody felt anything. I raised my hand. I said, "I felt this buzzy, and I could feel this energy running." He says, "Come on up here, and I want you to kneel." So I kneel in front of him. He says, "Close your eyes." I close my eyes. He puts his hands up like this. Well, only I can't see him. So I'm telling the story out of order. I kneel down. He says, "Put your hands up like this." I have my eyes closed. He says, "What do you feel?" I say, I feel tingling in my palms like windmills, like breath. And he says, "Now open your eyes." His hands are an inch away from mine,
Whoa.
doing this, and everybody in the class is like.
Whoa.
And he says to me, "So how long have you been practicing?" I'm like, "Practicing what?" And so
How long
from that
had these superpowers?
right, so from that point on, I mashed up Kriya Yoga into my Hatha Yoga. And so I began the interior exploration of my own, which is anti-Christian. Okay, this is yoga was evil in these days, and
Right.
chakras was devil talk.
Yeah.
And so I left the church. I came back with no religion. I came back with no faith, no belief, and no doubt that God's real.
Right.
And
Right.
so I I began the 40-year practice of seeking my chakras as not by envisioning them with my colorful imagination, but by just looking at them with my meditative practice and replacing my prayer chant with my physical forms as I move through yoga. And so these things, they're real.
Yeah, yeah, they are.
That's all I can say is that they're real, and you can connect them, and it gets back to the whole digging your way back to the divine. There was this guy called Tilliard, no, not Tilliard Desjardins, but gosh, I can't think of it. Pierre. Anyway, I'll skip his name. It'll come to me. Anyway, he wrote a book called The Divine Milieu, in which he talks about self-divinization. He's
Mm.
a Catholic priest, a scientist who was banned to China because of his mysticism in the 20th century. And if I could think of his friggin' name, I'd tell you, but I can't think of it.
But I probably can't spell it anyway.
Yeah, I have to look it up every time. And so
Okay.
you can basically you can dig your way back. And the inner yoga practice that I developed for myself is a digging tool.
Wow, this is cool. Okay, so I'm afraid we're almost out of time, but so if you wanted to leave the audience with something profound, I mean, obviously they need to go to your site and go look at your books. They need to watch your videos. They need to come to the IONS online conference and hear your conversation there, which is in August, mid-August. It's the 14th through the 16th. And I think I'm on the volunteer committee, and I think the website's about to launch, but it's not quite launched yet. I give the URL, but they'd kill me because I don't think it's up yet.
And that wouldn't be so bad now, would it?
To die. Oh, anyway. So, Don Lynch. Hi, Don. I don't know if he's in Mexico or in the US right now. He said, are you able to change the direction of spin of your
Of my energy?
uh-huh.
I have not. You mean like the spin of my chakras?
Chakra and probably your Taurus.
I just try to let it flow. I'm not trying to control it. And so my whole practice is not about trying to make it do anything. My whole practice is to get out of the way of the purity of the self and allow that thing to come through me. And so you can weaponize it, that's for sure. I know, I've been hit. And one of my Tong Soo Do Muda Kwan teacher, I asked him to show me his chi, and he hit my gi with a spinning back kick. He never touched me, and I locked up like a previously molten statue, frozen.
Right.
So, but that's not my thing. I want to mention Saturday, August 22nd, from noon Eastern and 9 Pacific, Saturday, August 22nd. I'll be speaking on the IONS event, the conference, and my subject will be You Don't Need an NDE, Seeing Through the Veil.
Is it on the 22nd? I thought we were at the 14th.
Oh, the 15th. Yeah.
I got the 22nd.
Give me the right date there.
Okay, well, the dates, you want me to go find it?
No, I can do that. I got that right here.
Commercial. Oh, well.
Yeah, get it on the 15th. I'm dyslexic.
No, it's perfect.
So anyway, it's Saturday, August 15th.
Right.
You don't need an NDE, Seeing Through the Veil. And I've been presenting at every IONS conference since 2017. And this year we're streaming, and please join us there.
Right.
And details at ions.org.
And you guys, for my audience, I have to let you know, I've been involved with IONS for probably 4 or 5 years because I recognize the frequency after having my own experiences that these people that have touched the other side and come back, it's palpable love that you feel, and they can't wait to share it with you. They live a different way. They see their whole being in a different way, and it's quite delightful. So I highly encourage you. I think you'll see I'm going to be bringing on other IONS adventurers that are willing to share their story. And thank you, Peter. This was fantastic. I want to hear more, of course, so we'll have to do this again. And
Thank you. I'd love to.
At the IONS event. And IONS is a nonprofit. It's iands.org. The virtual conference is the first time they've ever done it in a virtual manner because this is their main fundraiser. They usually do it in person. There's experiencer rooms. So if you have had even a spiritually transformative experience, you can talk with other people and again get language. That's what I mean. Peter got to study the mystics to get language and spent 30, 40 years working through it. You don't have to. You can actually get support from people like Peter to help you process these amazing gifts that you've been given. So, and it's all accessible for all of us. That's the journey, right?
And I book sessions at my site if you want to talk.
Oh, you
So,
do? Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, so Peter, on your website's the best way. You also are on Facebook. Is there anything else
mhm.
that any other way that you'd like people to connect with you besides buy your books?
I'm on YouTube, Instagram, mostly on Facebook though. That's where I tend to operate. Well, anyway, I won't get into
Go
that.
ahead. Go
But
ahead.
I'm on Facebook, and you wanted me to leave some sort of like, so you are the light of the world,
Yeah.
and love is all there is.
Yes.
And if you seek interiorly, your whole world shifts exteriorly. The
Yes.
deeper you go on the inside, which is infinite, the better it is on the outside. And if you are facing struggles and troubles in your life, it doesn't fix those struggles and troubles, but it does give you an inner resource and strength to face them, and a stability and balance on the interior. God is love.
Perfect. And I say that I almost could do that as a tag. Love is all. It
Love
really
is all there is.
is.
La da 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 da.
But gosh, you're talented. Anyway, thank you, Peter, so much. And I hope I get to have you back. And I definitely will listen to your presentation on ions at the conference. And I'm such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks everybody for your questions. I'll come back through and look at the comments, and
Okay.
peace and love.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. Peace and love.
Thank you. Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye bye.
Bye.